Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of The Automated Advantage. Today we have the CEO of A Iceberg, a company that focuses on AI technologies. And we have the CEO, Alexander Schlager, who has got some very interesting insights to share with us. Hopefully, everybody enjoys this episode and leave your comments and likes and appreciate the listening. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Automated Advantage. My guest today is Alexander, and I'm not going to brutalize his last name. I'll let him introduce himself and the name of his company.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Greg. I'm Alex Schlager, so it's an A, not an A. Company is A Iceberg, founder and CEO. Been on that startup journey the last 2.5, close to 3 years now.
That's amazing. So I was looking at your website, and every time I do these podcasts, I find it really interesting and just learning the different types of businesses people have. I get a decent sense of what you're doing, but maybe just explain to everybody what hole in the market you feel like you're solving, why are you doing this, and just a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So the technical term is what we do is detection and response for AI-powered workflows, which is a mouthful. Think of it this way: whenever companies use generative AI models or increasingly agentic AI, we are the component that helps them, make these interactions safe and secure. And the big difference is in the, before ChatGPT and others, cybersecurity was based on firewalls and intrusion detection and vulnerabilities, and so pick any cybersecurity category. What's different now? It's all based on language, right? So the inputs are in natural language, the agents exchange information in natural language, and we really don't have any detection capabilities to detect malicious intent or illegal intent or attacks that are now based in natural language and not in code or network signatures or whatnot.
Yeah, that's you made me think. That's actually a very valid point. So, and then as far as your ideal customer, like who are you targeting to be able to I saw you got several solutions and a couple of options there, but like what are you going after? What's the market for you?
So we come at the end of deployment. So, there's a lot of companies trying to do everything for everyone or be everything for everyone. I always was very cautious not to do that. So we really specialize in what's called the runtime, right? So once you go into production, one the thing sees the light of day and is therefore vulnerable. This is where we come in sense of, providing that runtime security. Um, There's other buckets, meaning companies that support companies in design, in the build phase. Um, we're sitting at runtime. Um, Customer wise, it's a mix. So we have a lot of large enterprises because they have, the intellectual power, the work, the capital to move very fast in AI. So you see a lot of companies deploying fast there. But we also have small and medium-sized companies that are native or even founded on the principle of having these technologies now available as they create value. So it's really the entire spectrum. Again, we see companies with 50 employees leveraging Gen AI and agentic AI very successfully. And you see large corporations, insurances, healthcare providers, financial institutions, basically, building their own AI tracks and their own AI capabilities.
Mhm. That makes sense. And so, how are they finding you? I mean, are you what's your acquisition model? Thing?
So the challenge in our space, it's a very new space. We tend to, or we used to, now it changed a little bit, but let's say 3 months ago we would do 50% of the selling process was education, right? Was creating the awareness, talking about responsible AI, talking about risk associated with agentic AI, and so on and so forth. We see that the maturity is increasing, so we have more pointed conversations with customers. But it is classic channels like doing events where you meet folks face to face, using LinkedIn, using Google Ads, and as much as possible, thought leadership. I mentioned to you earlier when we're chatting, we have our own podcast where we talk about all things AI. We publish articles, we publish papers as well with our university partners, which is one of the many legs, I would say, that the marketing effort stands on.
Yeah, I did see that where you said you were ground in academic excellence. Maybe explain that a little bit as well.
When we founded the company, we founded it as a research project originally. So a friend of mine, Professor Lendas, at the time was the chair at the University of Houston, and so we basically raised money to stand up an AI lab, and we acquired is the wrong word. We hired the most talented students from the university to work in that lab. With the release of GPT, we kind of focused our efforts, to the problem of safety and security in connection with Gen AI and now agentic AI, and this created kind of this cadence of doing academic research, supporting the students. They need to publish whatever we can, meaning what we can without damaging our own IP. And we fostered that moving forward. We now have 3 PhD students at the University of Tech and Science in Missouri. We have another research project that we are co-sponsoring there. And because it's such a new space, a lot of the new discoveries and methodologies, they come from academia. So I think A, it's one way of trying to give back, and B, it's a very effective way for a startup to acquire or attract talent.
Mm. It's interesting you say that. Actually, I worked for a consulting company for several years ago. There was kind of started out of the same thing. A bunch of professors figured out that there was a way to extract data and go and do something on the side and build some tools and stuff like that. So, no, I thought about that. That's we have a somewhat similar background. There was a little bit in my past, but I guess the question that I ask a lot of people, and it's so hard to ask it in today's day and age. Sometimes is this. So you saw this. You were essentially ahead of the curve to a degree, right? 2.5 years ago for AI to what 2.5 years it is 2.5 years later is significantly different. So maybe the question becomes, what's different if you can even say that? It's like, man, there's been this, and we're here now, and the speed of change. I've got to believe that you've seen a lot.
When we started the research project, Gen AI was already a thing, but it hasn't entered mainstream. So, obviously in specialized circles, it was worked on and experimented on for quite some time. But I came in from the cybersecurity side, so I'm not pure data scientist from that perspective. So I had to learn a lot myself. And when we started in machine learning. Machine learning, deep learning. The research project the idea was to build alternative explainability methods on deep learning models, meaning black boxes that improve human comprehension of how these models work internally. And then you supercharge the problem with a large language model, basically, right? Because any interpretability or explainability is gone. Um, Anthropic made some progress in the interpretability field, but explainability is obviously not possible. And this is how we combined the dots. We were researching on explainability and human comprehension of the inner works of models, and then GPT was released, which was the perfect example of that's why explainability is important. So we base all our models, all our methodologies that we apply to safeguard and secure interactions with Gen AI on the basis of explainable AI. So this is how come we took the research, and this is how we kind of crossed the arc in sense of applying that problem to large language models, basically.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and that's interesting evolution. So let's talk about a little bit. So what I try to do with this podcast too is not only just educate people and stuff like this, but hey, people that are going out to start a business, advice and those types of things. So maybe we'll take it in some sections. But what is a what is a typical day, if there is a typical day, look like for you, and what keeps you busy during the day?
Everything. I mean, when you found a company, at least in our case, we really try to be very effective with money. And you see both in both worlds, right? You see startups that rent very expensive offices and and the most expensive swagger, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Our approach was we have a long road of research ahead of us. Which was almost 2 years. So one thing was really centered around effective use of the capital. So as a CEO in the first 2 years, I literally wore every hat, right? HR, I wrote the employee contracts, I checked travel expenses, worked with the research team, worked with the engineering team. So I think this is something that if you like context switching, there's obviously a lot of that. As a company grows, you retreat from some areas because you bring subject matters in that respective field on board. I was part of every engineering call the first year. As the engineering team grew and we got more senior people on board, they basically kicked me out of the call, right? Because we do us, right? We do development, and which is good, and this is also the culture we're trying to foster, is brutal honesty, and always focus on the outcome and the objectives we're trying to achieve. So I was kicked out because correctly we reached the size and the span where they didn't want the CEO and the founder on these calls anymore, because it became sometimes counterproductive, because sometimes I just couldn't keep my mouth shut, and that's why it was a great decision to say, what, we have reached that point in time now where we make that separation. So that's one of the things I think you observe as you grow, when is really the right time and the necessary time to make a step back in a specific area.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you say that too, in the sense that, again, I keep taking things back, but like in today's day and age with these businesses moving so fast. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was like, "What's your piece of advice?" And he's like, "The CEO just needs to be the decision maker." And in these days and age, you don't have time to sit down and think about it and have a meeting and then come back and think about it. You got to be on it. Is that what you're experiencing as well?
Yes and no. I mean, this decision making, or in sense of daily operations, yes, right, when it's related to customers or issues or incidents or whatever it is. But there's a big part also in the product forming and in the market forming exercise, right? We're in a segment which is very brand new. Most companies have not invested into capabilities that we and our competitors offer, so there's a lot of development and research work as well involved. We really try to see where the ball will be in a year and a half. So not
Mhm.
build basically the soup du jour, but really try to understand where the space is evolving and build to that point. Uh, and and therefore, you know, the big part of my work is still development and research.
Yeah. And you mentioned this when we were just getting warmed up and before we hit the recording, but you also talked about from a marketing capability and stuff. But so, like in your day to day activities, what are you leveraging AI for to help not have to work 20-hour days?
Oh,
Hopefully.
we use it extensively. And it becomes a question of competitiveness, right? You often hear enterprises saying we need to do AI to remain competitive. This is a great example. All our startup competitors effectively use AI, and it is a significant cost and time benefit. We use it in coding to a limited degree, meaning the more senior folks use it for automation. We use it for DevOps, which is basically the software development
Mhm.
on the infrastructure layer, if you like. We use it in marketing, right? Our marketing lead fine-tuned an image generator that produces imagery for our podcasts, for our blogs, that is automatically fully compliant to our style guides and color guides and whatnot. This would have taken significant amount of time, just a year ago. So we use it for partially for scripting. We use it for synthetic data generation. Uh, we work with a company called Revic, Revic. They use agentic AI to help you find the right customers, right? So you basically train these agents on your ICP, on your product, and your capabilities. You give it a list of, let's say, 500 accounts, and it will collect all the signals it finds in the internet and score the target as in how likely are they to buy within the next 30 days, for example.
Yeah.
So a lot of the manual work that we had even in our business, sales prospecting, sales research, marketing, is basically all automated with AI today.
That's incredible, and I mean, I think that's obviously the way that it is going to evolve. And just to take you back to the conversation you said too, which it where we're at right now, it's such an interesting intersection, or wherever, whatever you want to call it, dip, trajectory. But I was talking to somebody, a customer, and they were like, "Yeah, we need to, we need to embrace AI." I was like, "Okay, what does that mean?" And then they told their employees, "If you don't embrace AI, you'll be looking for a new job." And they were like, "Well, what does that mean?" And they were like, just use AI. And I was like, okay, I think people need to have a strategy and an approach, and there's got to be some logic behind it. And kind of where you guys then come in is to, like you said, towards the end. And I think I mean, to me, there's a phenomenal market for getting it right all the way along the cycle. And it's, I mean, there's so many options to be able to do it. And maybe just to finish that out too, is my fundamental belief too, is people are like, oh, it's, it's going to eliminate jobs and stuff like that. It's like, no, you still have to check the homework, even with the developers and stuff. I was in a role before where we did it. You still got to check the homework, but the homework is now 80% done, as opposed to starting with a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. There's a bit of AI whitewashing going on, right? Everything is AI, and every startup is AI
Mm.
now. But I think what the successful enterprises, or the enterprise successful in AI adoption, did is they asked really the hard question of what exactly do we think we can get out of this, right? So rather than saying, "Hey, everybody has to use AI," it was really about where actual productivity gains can be made. Can be made. Agentic AI is a great example, right? We saw one group of customers trying to replicate human processes by agentic AI, and the other group basically removed the human process and just looked at the outcome and focused on producing the same outcome. Subtle difference, but
Mhm.
a big difference in outcomes in success rates. And there you really see cost going significantly down. We talk to companies that have plan to release their first chatbot in Q2 of next year, and this will be their first
Mhm.
use case in AI, and we're talking about a very large media company. So it it's very individual driven, right? If you have senior leadership in these companies that are forward looking, that are ready to take risk to adopt AI, you see fast outcomes. We saw a couple of banks that were very fast in adoption and have things in production today, to my earlier comment, where others have just started thinking about it.
Yeah. No, that's true. I see the same thing. So also kind of just talking around the getting the business going, getting started. It's an interesting business model you have with the university and the study and all of that stuff. But if you, like I said, it's so different to somebody going out and saying, I need to go hire some developers, or I need to go do whatever it is. But as far as maybe the hardest thing and a lesson learned from when you started until now, is there something specific that you say, man, this is a piece of advice I would give somebody, I learned it a really hard way?
Um, it, well, it depends. In my case, I'm an engineer, and I'm very in awe of technology. And I one naive approach was, if you build very strong tech, um, it will basically sell itself, right? And because I came from a very engineer focused or engineer centric mindset, and I had to learn the hard way that it takes a long time for a market to evolve and learn, and you need to learn to abstract and simplify to a very large degree to not lose your audience. And you will find fewer people that are at the same level of technical comprehension in some fields than you believe. And in the end of the day, it comes down to one thing: are you solving a problem for your customer, and how easy are you making it solving the problem? That abstracts basically all the tech talk away. But that was a lesson for me to learn in the beginning, that because we spent so much time in research, and it was really some very heavy lifting on the technology side, don't expect that anybody will appreciate it looking from the outside in.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Right, and focus really at the utility that it provides to your customers and the problems it solves.
Yeah, it's like interesting. It's like, I mean, that's the one fundamental of business that hasn't changed, right? Make sure you're solving a customer problem
Yeah.
and get it, and it's relevant. So in that vein, when when you talk to customers and things like that, and this is, I don't know the answer to this, and it's the first time I've asked the question, is, are you seeing people kind of helping you with your customers, maybe helping you with the outcome? Because you're kind of talking about an outcome, and I feel like we, again, maybe going back to the 80/20 principle, maybe the tool or the it's 80% there. Are they open to the, let's get together to the end
Oh yeah.
together? Or okay, so we're
So
moving away from the, we need a defined project and product that does this, right?
yes, because we are not that, you know that's far ahead than our customers in sense of comprehension of the problem space. It would be arrogant to suggest any such. So the earlier days were very much driven by desk research, right? As you understand the technology and try to predict where it's moving based on that desk research, you start building out capabilities, which we did. But there's a point where you have enough critical mass in the market, in demand, in people that have seen that problem already, where you go into customer calls and you say, look, we can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the customer would say, I fully agree, these are great things to do, but have you thought about 6, 7, and 8? Because we think that might be an issue, right? So if you look at all the capabilities we have today, 50% came, as to your point, from these conversations where customer says, yeah, but we think this and this and this is important. Have you thought of that, right? And this is how things get on the roadmap. So it starts with desk research, and now we are basically fully tipped into customers using the product, now basically providing feedback.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you said that because I come from a big consulting background, Accenture, IBM, and that type of stuff, where we sold these big projects, and I've got a couple of proposals out there, and I've been sitting like in a sort of a dilemma, trying to make the proposal simplified, small bite sizes, and to the point that it makes sense that we're getting to the end result. My focus is not, that to your point, not necessarily their focus. I think we should do this, this, and this first, and they're like, no, let's flip that on the head. And I think in the old days, from my consulting days, they were like, that's not how we do it. You got to,
Yeah.
it's very, very different. And I love it. It keeps every day
Selling
very
has
unique.
changed a lot. I used to run a sales organization very shortly for 3, 4 years as an engineer. It was a great experience, but not necessarily, I think, my future calling. But one thing, if I compare it to that, was 2015, 16, selling has changed a lot. And not only due to COVID in sense of, remote and in person, but also in sense of customer expectations and what they expect, how to consume, in sense of, for example, data loss protection, right? 10 years ago, data loss protection came with a lot of manual effort, data tagging, and it was a lot of data processing required on the customer side. We talk to a lot of prospects and customers these days. They just want a DLP solution where they do not have to touch their data, right? Everything should be off the shelf. Everything has to be, easy, as few clicks as possible. And that's a big change. I still came from an enterprise world where people didn't mind reading big manuals and getting into the command line and doing things like that. I configured Cisco routers. It was all command line. Now these days, it's a very different expectation and experience.
Yeah, and I mean, I think being in being a little bit more seasoned, I find it really fun. I'm seeing the world flip on its head, and it's definitely a fun environment. So with about 5 minutes or so left, we touched on this too. But if you were to say, look, somebody's looking to get into starting a business, doesn't have to be AI, doesn't have to be anything. Like, what are the 2 or 3 things? It's like, okay, here's what you need to have in place, otherwise you're going to struggle.
Well, it's, I guess, a long list. What comes to top of mind is, well, one thing we were grilled on: are you a feature, a product, or a platform? This might be specific now to our industry, right? But it's an important distinction to make, whether you feature a product or a platform, based on your expandability, growth potential, versus being a one-off. The other thing is, are you basically just, what's the right term here? An overlay or an augmentation, right? We have seen this with Apple, where small companies build great apps, and then Apple likes it, does it himself, and the company's gone. And we saw the same thing happening now in the AI space, right? There's a lot of startups basically being bolt on, wasn't the word I was looking for, bolting onto a Cloud or GPT, and then one of those or both decide, yeah, that's a great idea, we'll do it ourselves. I think I forgot the exact number, but it was a scary large number. So over 100 startups basically went belly up just by the fact that they were bolt on, and at one point, the foundation model provider did it themselves, right? It's the same as with Apple. So I think that's a really important test to make. How will your product, platform, feature stand the test of time? Which also means, how easy is it to replicate?
Mm-hmm.
And and it might even be worth doing that if you have a right anticipation of your shelf time, right? If you know, look, in 2 years somebody is going to absorb it or do it themselves, you can still do it, but you probably go for an acquisition exit or something then. So I think that's a really important piece to ask at the beginning. Advisors, a good advisory board will get you a long way, and an advisory board that is staffed in for all your main disciplines. In the early days, I had somebody in it for engineering, so I don't run into the biggest traps or issues on the engineering side. We had somebody else who helped us introduce to early customers. So advisory board in the early days, for us at least, helped us a lot also to avoid certain mistakes. I mean, the list goes on and on and on,
Yeah.
but I think, the bolt-on litmus test, I think, is an important piece if you're in tech. The advisory board, I think, is industry spanning, that, the more help you can get, the better.
Yeah, no,
And maybe the last thing is apologies. This is a thing, 'cause I discussed it with a friend yesterday. You have to be ready that it's a roller coaster experience. I always call it the schizophrenic experience, because as a startup, you go through phases where one day you think you have, figured it out, and the next day you basically think this is never going to work, right? And you go through these cycles, which can be taxing, but you wouldn't do a startup if you wouldn't mind that, is my guess.
yeah, I mean, it's funny you said that. Just for me, somebody told me this, and I was like, yeah, but I mean, my thing is so simple and all of this stuff. So your timing isn't aligned with the customer's timing. It's like it's it'll take longer than it needs to. You just need to be patient. You need to know that you're doing the right thing. You're solving a problem. At some point in time, your timings will come together, but it may not be at the same time that you think it's going to come, and that's
Yeah.
very difficult to do when you're waiting to make the next big move.
I agree. Also, one thing that we experienced and I saw with peers of mine is, if something works and you can click on it and if the experience works the first time as you want the customer to experience it, you are far away from a product still. Because people focus on the shiny things and hey, it works, let's roll
Yeah.
it out. But to move something from it's working to a customer, or hundreds or thousand customers can use it, that is a massive step. And I see a lot of people falling into that trap.
Yeah, the scalability aspect, and that's what I've also
Scaling
seen
issue.
with ChatGPT. Oh yeah, but okay, now try it for 10 different scenarios. That's where it's very different.
Yeah.
Well,
So we had this scary test where we would say, let's run a simulation. What happens if you get, I don't know, 5 billion tokens a day for analysis and things, right? And this is how we found out the painful way that we are not as ready at that time back then as we thought we were.
yeah. So here's one that I've been trying out, and let's hope this goes. So in the US, there's the curveball in baseball. I'm from originally from South Africa, and there's a ball in cricket called the googly, which is it looks normal, and then it really embarrasses you when it hits the ground. So
Right.
I've been asking people, like, is there some word of advice that somebody gave you that was the stupidest, you thought was the stupidest thing, but you tried it anyway? Is there something that you can think of that was a little silly, that, like, some guy told me, I was told I had to wear the same socks to every meeting that was going to help close a deal? Anything like that you can remember in your past or in the current time?
Not really, but here's one that I found. So one of our main solution architect, he likes to design board games. He's extremely passionate as a hobby to design board games, and he's really good at it. So he was like, I'm gonna build a machine learning board game, and when we go to events and stuff, we just sit down and play board games with people. And I was like, different generation. I was like, really, you really think it's gonna fly? And as I said, sales was very different in my time. And I said, look, go for it, right? And it was a huge success.
Wow.
Because people didn't feel that they were trying to be sold something at the booth, right? So they would sit down. It was a board game, it was a new game to learn. They played for 20, 30 minutes. And during these conversations, we got perfectly pre-qualified prospects. I was skeptical. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like board games, right? But I come from a time where, I don't know, trying to get people convinced to play board games at a booth would not have been my first pick, but hey, I stand corrected. It was we did it 3 times now, and it was always a massive
That's
success.
amazing. I've never heard of it. The only other one that I've seen has been phenomenally successful is these people cheated and they brought a bunch of puppies to the booth.
Yeah, hey, well, that's right. Hey, that's how we got our dog. By the way, my wife got handed a puppy at a party, and she was like, "Yeah, I can't, I can't give it back."
But I like that idea. You see, that's the thing is in this day and age, people think outside the box. Outside the box, there's so many things to do. Well,
Yeah,
Alexander, I really enjoyed our chat. This is it was super
likewise.
interesting. Thank you for the time. Any parting words of wisdom or anything else you wanted to
I
share?
think we shared enough
Yeah,
wisdoms. I hope any of them were wisdoms.
let's
It
hope.
was great meeting you. Thank you for having
You
me.
too. Enjoy.